Welcome to EOTalks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EO Alive.
Hey, Eastern Oregon, thank you for joining us today on this show. We're here today with Grigg from CHD, and we're talking today about suicide prevention. And Aaron, thanks for jumping in with me today. And how's it going? How are you surviving the smoke out there?
Oh, we're doing okay. You know, we're spending time inside, and my job keeps me inside quite a bit, but I think we're surviving.
Yeah, well, and we've kind of come through this crazy COVID thing and getting back to some kind of normal life. And so, yeah, I'm sure that just what a strange world we're living in right now. So,
right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Aaron. Today we're going to talk about you guys are, there's a number of events. There's a movie coming out here. It's already out locally, the Joe Bell movie. And then you guys are doing a big push about suicide prevention. Why don't you talk to us for a minute, kind of about, I don't know, give us a little bit of background information and kind of what you guys are planning.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the movie Joe Bell came out last Friday. I've not seen it myself, and I don't know the family personally. But it was an event that pretty tragic event that impacted this community a number of years ago. I help lead a local coalition of individuals throughout the community from various entities we meet once a month and we talk about efforts in the community to prevent suicide and to provide good response in the unfortunate event that there is a suicide. And we've been trying to coordinate and make sure that we get out information to the community about the resources that are available to prevent suicide, for mental health issues, so that people know that there is hope and there is help out there. So we have a number of ads in different locations that are out advertising our crisis line. So we have a mental health crisis line. It's 541-962-8800. And you dial option 6 and you can get through 24/7 to talk to somebody. If you're having a difficult time and just need someone to talk to, you can call this number. During regular business hours, you'll get patched to a local individual that can just triage with you and figure out what services might be available to help you. This crisis line is also attached to our mobile crisis team. We actually have a team of professionals who respond out in the community. If somebody calls in and they're having thoughts of suicide or not wanting to live, this team will go out and meet with them wherever they're at and help them get the services that they need. Not only services, but just support and support for the entire family. And so right now, our biggest thing, we're working together with the school district, law enforcement, even with the movie theater, to make sure that information is out there and available. This is in also, September is a suicide prevention month, so we're ramping up for that to get out more information to the community. This is a very serious issue. As I mentioned, we meet monthly with the Suicide Prevention Coalition, and so we hope to get information out on a regular basis throughout the community. We don't want anybody to ever be in this situation where they don't feel like they have the support they need, and we want everybody to stay alive.
Awesome. How does, so often, when you hear about a suicide or someone might experience a suicide close to them, the hopelessness is just such a thing that people experience. And what, and just the idea of suicide prevention, I mean, we have to do everything that we can do, and you guys are doing that. But what, for someone, I've never been in a place myself where I felt like I was tempted to take my own life, or I didn't want to go on living, because partially it's just not a part of my personality. But I'm sure if I was in a situation, I would, I'm sure that there are people that experience that didn't ever think that it wasn't part of their personality. I don't know. Talk a little bit about maybe what people really experience when they haven't experienced that. And then also, what are some of the things that we should look for in our friends or our family or our children that really might be in danger? They might be depressed enough that they're considering those things.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Brent. Those feelings of hopelessness lead to a lot of challenges. It's interesting what you say about, it's never entered into your thoughts. And I think for most people that end up having these thoughts, they think the same thing. They realize, that this is nothing I ever considered before, but it's sometimes it's a gradual buildup. Sometimes it's pretty sudden. It's really different for every individual, but it's serious, and it's a serious issue that we need to create a safe place in our community to talk about. And really that safe place is everywhere. We need to talk about it more and be more open as a community. It's such a challenging topic that we just don't talk about it. One of the trainings that we provide to the community for any individual is called Question, Persuade, and Refer. And it's, the title of it is the description of what it's about. It's knowing how to ask people if they've ever had those thoughts before. If you're starting to suspect that somebody's having a challenging time, how do you ask them? And basically you just ask. You ask, have you ever had thoughts of ending your life? So there's ways to phrase it where it's a little less, confrontational. And so we encourage people to ask and have those conversations, and then to talk to them about, hey, there are some people that can help with this. There is some help. And then to help that person get to the place, to call the number we just talked about, to contact their medical provider, to just call up the Center for Human Development. There's a number of ways. Reach out to ecclesiastical leaders in churches. We actually did a training for, we've done a number of trainings for religious leaders in the communities around how to help people get into services when they're having these thoughts. So, if nothing else, it's really about everybody working together to create a culture where we can freely talk and question people, because that's the biggest danger. When we're assessing people for the risk of suicide, that's one of the things that concerns me the most, is when the person's not talking about what's going on in their life. And for families, there could be a lot of things that they can recognize as some signs. And one of them is the person starting to isolate more. The person's being less social, less, involved in things. They're talking, they're not talking about future anymore. They're one of the signs that often we see is people start giving away belongings that are pretty special to them, but not always. But increased depression, anxiety, comments about, being worried or concerned about their future, hopeless type language. But then also there's others that just kind of shut off and they're not talking anymore and they're having a harder time. So when they're reducing that social interaction more than they've ever done in the past, that's also something we need to look for. Those are some of the things that I'm always on the lookout for. I've been impacted in my own family where, I've had to ask those questions to others, the more we talk about it, the less likely the person will be to carry it out, because they're getting it out of here into the environment. It's out of their head. One of the real challenges with people that are struggling with suicidal thoughts is there's so much going on in their mind. And so it's important to get that out, so that someone else can share that burden. And that's really important.
So when you said just ask, my first instinct is, well, will they tell you the truth? Will they, but it sounds like there is a component in that hopelessness where they want to talk. They want someone to ask, or to create a gate for them to talk about that. I don't know. Is that your experience?
Yeah, that's for the most part, people do want to, but sometimes there's individuals that won't talk about it and they won't be honest about it. And so that's why we have to keep talking. And if we do have concerns about a person having thoughts of suicide and they're not talking about it, that's when we, need to go to some of those resources and try to get help for that person. We've had people that have been brought to us or brought up to the hospital that the family was concerned, and there was a lot of behaviors that were indicating that there was suicidal ideation going on. And it's important to get that person to a professional, because then we've been trained on how to get that person to talk more deeply than they may have talked about it. But, it is different for every person. But for the most part, what everybody can do is, sometimes we have to force ourselves to say things we're not comfortable with, like in this situation. But obviously you don't go up to the person and just ask them right away. You start off with the conversation and talk about how they're doing, and talk about, develop that kind of relationship of trust. But voicing it is very important. One thing that's, we always like to say about suicide prevention is that it's completely preventable. And it's really about getting people to talk about it, especially in the community. It's so taboo, I think, in our society to talk about it. And there's so much fear around contagion and more people, considering it if we talk about it. The reality is the more that we talk about it in an appropriate manner, the less power those thoughts have over us individually when we're struggling with those thoughts. Because there's just something about language and getting those words out there and talking about them that it loses its power. And I really think of it as like you're taking it off of your own shoulders and you're putting it out there for that burden to be shared by others.
This sounds very much like some of the similar dysfunction that happens in silence with addiction, where you can't really deal with whatever addiction you might be having until you find a safe place. You've said that several different times, a safe place to talk about. Is there some similarities there, at least in that part of that experience?
Sure. It's all, we look at substance use as an illness, as well as we look at thoughts of suicide and anxiety and depression. Just because it's an illness doesn't mean it's something we shouldn't talk about. It's that, people go to their physicians and go to professionals for diabetes and for all kinds of health issues. As a society, we need to get more accustomed to being open to go and talk to mental health professionals as well. I really do hope for the day one day when we can be as honest with our friends and family about going and seeing a counselor as we are about going to the dentist. I got a dentist appointment. I got to go see my counselor. And it's just, there's a huge stigma about, you're a bad person if you're having those kind of, you're not a bad person. It's like,
right.
You're struggling with something that is real. It's real for you. It's not just in your head. It's real. It's something that you're experiencing and nobody else is. And we need to acknowledge that and so that we can make sure that that person gets help, or also that that person is able to acknowledge that struggle so that the burden can be shared and they're not in it alone. That's the worst part, is if the person is in this all alone. We want people to not feel like they're all alone in those struggles.
Are there times, or is there part of your programming, where you have an opportunity for, and this is similar to someone who is addicted and trying to recover, where they're able to connect with someone who might have considered suicide at a time and kind of came back from that edge of hopelessness? Is that also part of the treatment part?
Yeah, there's a really powerful tool that we have in community behavioral health, and that's with our peer mentors. And we've had a few of our peer mentors here on EO Alive before. Mm-hmm. And these are individuals who have shared experience. So we have a few peer mentors that are both substance use disorder peer mentor, but they're also mental health. They've actually gotten through mental health crises. They've had a mental health diagnosis in the past. They've really gained recovery, as we would call it. And they're able to connect with that person and say, hey, I've been where you're at. I've had those same thoughts myself. And with help, I was able to overcome those. So I get a little choked up sometimes, because it is really powerful to be able to talk to somebody who knows exactly what you're feeling. Because one of the big dangers is that a person, like I mentioned before, feels like they're alone. They feel like nobody understands them. And that's actually, when you talk to somebody who has either attempted suicide or had a lot of suicidal ideation, that's one of the things that they always talk about is, I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. Nobody really could grasp my experience. So that's a really powerful tool that we have right here in Union County. We have some great individuals and they tell me, it's funny, I just had a conversation with a number of them a couple of weeks ago, and they said, and they were talking, they said, we don't do this because of the salary. We do this because we don't want others to go through the same thing we did. One of them, in fact, was saying, I didn't have all these resources that we have now when I went through this, and I want others to not have to go through all the struggles and the roadblocks that I ran into when I was trying to get help. And so we're trying to make that help more accessible, more available in the community. And that's not only with the counselors and the psychiatrists, and it's also with our peer mentors, like I was talking about. And then also making sure that the community is trained on how to have these conversations, because the more people that are aware and can talk about this, that's really where it's going to make the difference. Is that as a culture, we really start to shift and open up and talk more.
No, I think that'd be a great conversation to have on a live stream, frankly, to be able to talk about how to ask some of those questions and so on and so forth. Because you're right. I'm sure that there are families who have lost other family members to suicide, and part of their conclusion or part of their regret is, I just wish I would have asked. I just wish I would have, because there's and you can play this argument in any situation, but it's a lot better to be embarrassed yourself for asking the question, or to actually humiliated the person that you asked the question to. That's a far better risk. Either one of those is a far better risk than someone actually taking their life and losing them completely.
Yeah, and that's something we may want to look at for a future show. Yeah. I know that one organization we've worked with, they said they agree. They said that one of the most powerful tools is to get a family member who's gone through it and is now ready to kind of give back and tell their story and talk about it. And that really does help people realize, hey, this is something I want to start talking more about in my own family and amongst my own friends, rather than waiting until something tragic happens. So it's a very powerful tool, and I'd love to look at doing something like that.
I had an experience as a kid. I had an older brother, and I remember, and I don't know if I can tell the story without being emotional, but it was my brother. He was 2 years older than I and about a foot taller than I, and we would fight like cats and dogs. And there was one time that he injured me, and I had a cut on the back of my head. And of course, you know how a head wound just bleeds like crazy. And I remember at the end of the day, Dad finally came home, and I thought, all right, Brian's going to get what he deserves. I mean, he just really deserves this, you know. And my dad responded, rather than with discipline, he just said, Brian, what's going on? Tell us what's happening in your life that's making you feel this way. And that lesson has forever permeated my life because when he could have responded with discipline, and should have in some regards, and probably did, there were consequences, I'm sure, to what happened. You know, he responded in a loving manner. And I just, you know, I think I see those themes that are happening, whether that's drug abuse, or someone running around with the wrong people, or someone who is depressed and they're just doing things in an abnormal manner. You know, sometimes they just need someone to ask what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard it said once that when you meet somebody, treat them like they're having their worst day ever. And most 50% of the time, you'll be right. Yeah. So in greeting people, we need to realize that we get really stuck in our own heads, but we need to realize that everybody is experiencing some amount of suffering in their lives. And whether it can be small or large, it may be big to that individual. And if we just treated each other with that love and kindness as a society, you know, it's hard to understand how many ills we could actually solve. But, you know, in relation to what we're talking about, if we really open our eyes and recognize when people are having a hard time, or we just, maybe they are having a hard time, and talk, and maybe they'll open up and tell us, and we could save a life. You know, it's we've become really fragmented as a society, and the you know, the contention that exists in our society nowadays is really palpable at times, and I think it bleeds over, especially for our kids, and it greatly affects them. You know, I've learned that I've got to be careful about how I interact with my kids, because it'll affect them. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that, and think outside ourselves. And I'm not perfect at it by far, but it's something that I'm always trying to work towards. And, you know, it's, I think over these next couple months, we're going to try to do some things in the community to, you know, help, you know, provide some opportunities for healing. This last year has been tough. I mean, I think I underestimate all the time how difficult this has been for everybody. We've had a lot of people in the community that have lost loved ones. Elgin has been heavily impacted. I mean, they've had a lot of deaths in this last year. They held a really cool vigil yesterday in their community to recognize that and provide opportunity for some healing. And even in our own community, I mean, I don't know. I think everybody knows somebody that may have died from COVID. And I mean, the impact has been huge. And then we haven't necessarily seen suicide rates go up, but we've seen, at least in our work at the Center for Human Development, we've seen the rate of people having the thoughts of not living go up. So we've, you know, and I hope that never translates into more to higher rates of suicide. That's why we're trying to do everything we can to prevent that, and give people the outlet that they really need to be able to offload that burden.
Yeah, it's the hopelessness that gets people. They kind of box themselves into a place where they're convinced that no one cares, no one's going to miss me, the world will be better off without me. And they chip away some of those different things, and they can't find a way out. And
our message is that there is hope.
Yeah,
there's healing. We're here to listen. There's always somebody available to listen to your challenges. You're not alone. You're definitely not alone. And sometimes there's people in our lives that we would rather not even interact with because of whatever situation. But I found that even some of the most challenging people in our lives, we can relate to them on some level because of some challenges that they're having. And it's just a matter of talking and opening up. And we're not all comfortable with that. That's for sure. But at least with those that we're closest to, if we can create not just like a physical place, but like a sense that it's okay to talk about those struggles. But that's not going to solve everything. There's more. I mean, there's a lot of people with suicidal thoughts that have much more serious mental health challenges, whether it's even schizophrenia, bipolar. So there's some pretty serious mental health issues associated with it as well. Also, chronic pain is also one of the big drivers as well. And so, we're always, looking for ways to help people overcome those. There is answers. There's solutions to all of this to help people overcome those challenges. And so some of the more serious challenges may need some medication intervention, some counseling, some treatment. But there is that resource available. And if you can't find the resource, give us a call. We'll point you in the right direction. If we can't provide the assistance, we're going to get you to that source. Because frankly, that's why I do this work. I don't do it for any other reason than I don't know. It's I could go into my backstory, but there's reasons why I do what I do. And I don't like seeing suffering, and there's too much in the world. And sometimes it feels like we're not making an impact, but I want to make an impact, at least in this community, in this county. And that's what we're trying to do through at the Center for Human Development. And others are involved too. Like I said, we've got a coalition. We work with local law enforcement, county DA's office, the hospital, the primary care clinics, the local media, and so schools, all the school districts. We're trying to have coordination across the board, and there's a lot of resources and people out there that want to help. So
good. All righty. Well, thanks, Aaron, for jumping on with me today. And,
absolutely. My pleasure.
Appreciate it. And thanks for talking to us about this sensitive topic. So absolutely. And there's the number, folks, that you can call if you need to reach out to someone. Thanks for joining us on this EO Talks with EO Alive, your connection to Eastern Oregon, and we'll see you next time.